more on Jake Sullivan's diplomatic visit to the region. I'd like to bring in James Dorsey, who's a senior fellow over at Singapore's Middle East Institute. He joins us now live from Singapore. James, it is a pleasure having you on the show. If I were to summarize sort of our conversation with Ubay, it seems that sort of Sullivan's meetings with the Israeli leadership has made little headway addressing the growing rift between the U.S. and Israel over civilian casualties. Is that your take?
I think what you're seeing is two things. One is a widening gap between what is publicly said by U.S. and Israeli officials and what is happening behind the closed doors. The stream of U.S. Officials coming, you have Jake Sullivan there now, the announced visit by the U.S. Defense Secretary, Lloyd Austin, indicates that the Americans are putting pressure on Israel. But the problem for both the United States and Israel is that time is running out. Time is running out for the United States in terms of mounting pressure, both domestic and internationally, to see a significant reduction in Gazan civilian casualties. And time is running out for Israel because the question is, at what point does, in a sense, to put it bluntly, the United States put its boot down and say enough is enough?
If time is running out, and if you could sort of peek into the conversations that's happening behind closed doors, do you think that Sullivan, in this trip, really issued an ultimatum?
I don't think he issued an ultimatum, but I do think that the Americans have been indicating to the Israelis for some time now that their timeline is end of the year or early January to see a change. And what you're seeing, and that's part of a contradiction in a sense in this whole strategy, is that the gap between the United States and Israel is widening, not only on the way the war is conducted by Israel, but also on what happens the day the guns fall silent. So, with other words, the Americans want to see a reduced Israeli military presence in Gaza and a change of tactics. But fact of the matter is that on the ground, of all the options that are being discussed at the moment for what happens when the guns fall silent, the option least preferred by anybody, and in fact rejected by all, including Israel, but the most realistic one is, at least for a brief period of time, Israeli reoccupation of the Gaza Strip.
I think when you're sort of talking about this timeline, we need to sort of bring in the Palestinian perspective. The National Security Advisor, before he headed out to the region, when asked about the governance of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, he said it needs to be connected under a revamped and revitalized Palestinian Authority. What is your interpretation of that?
Well, I think that everybody agrees that the Palestinian Authority in its current form or its current state is inefficient, incapable, and corrupt. And so that's what revamping refers to. Now, I think that you've got, from the Palestinian point of view, in a sense, three positions. You have the position of the Palestine Authority that says we're not going to get engaged in Gaza unless our engagement is linked to a credible process for a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which means the establishment of an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. And then, in a sense, you have two Hamas factions. Now, you've had the Palestinian Prime Minister Steyer during the Doha Forum this weekend say that Hamas was part of the mosaic of Palestinian politics, and that it could join the PLO if it wished, if it were willing to abide by the PLO's commitments, including recognition of Israel. You've had several convoluted statements by Hamas exile leaders, sort of indicating that that's where they are going. And you've had Israeli reports that Yahya Sinwar, the Gaza leader of Hamas, is furious that the exile leaders are even discussing this with the Palestine Authority.
I mean, all right, if there's an understanding that the PA is ineffective, it is corrupt, I think most would agree with you. What is Jake Sullivan going to be talking about with Mahmoud Abbas then?
Well, one proposal that is floating around that has to do with Qatari proposals to revive negotiations for prisoner swaps is that the Qataris would like to see the prisoners that are swapped not only to be women and children this time round, but also men. And one of the male names that is being floated is that of Marwan Barghouti, who is in Israeli prison for life on 5 consecutive sentences on charges of murder, but is a popular leader of Al-Fatah, the main PLO group, and is someone who has worked with Hamas and therefore probably would be acceptable to Hamas. So with other words, that could be part of what restructuring of the PLO means.
Okay. James Dorsey, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us here on the NewsHour. Always appreciate talking to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.